Every morning I get up and I think about the two questions on this slide. It's been my major motivator for trying to do everything I can to help mitigate climate change. We all know of generations that made really poor or evil decisions. And as a consequence, all sorts of people were unnecessarily lost their lives or maimed. And they were really bad ancestors when you think about them. Well, what kind of ancestor will we be if we collectively had it within our voting and political power to mitigate climate change, and we didn't do that? And as a consequence, we left behind a burning, drowning, violent planet that's increasingly hostile to life itself. I also think about, do you love someone who was born in or after 1970? I pose that question every time I make this presentation because it doesn't take too long before you recognize yourself or a brother and sister, a son and daughter, or somebody you really, really care about. And I use that age, 70, because absent unfortunate circumstances, people born in 1970 and later will live till at least 2050, and some may live into the 22nd century. And if we've done a poor job of mitigating climate change, the horror shows we're seeing in the West today will look calm by comparison to the life that will be lived 2050 and later. So the RF100 Tulsa campaign is seeking to convince the City of Tulsa to commit to using all of its relevant government powers and resources to achieve three big energy goals. One goal is 100% of electricity used in Tulsa will be clean and renewable by the end of 2035. A second, 100% of all energy used in Tulsa will be clean and renewable by 2050. Third, Tulsa energy users will in the aggregate achieve maximum energy efficiency. For reasons I'm about to give you, the electricity goal is our current focus. So right now we're trying to get the City of Tulsa to adopt a resolution committing their resources to achieve that electricity goal. This is our best opportunity to achieve this goal because on July 2nd, 2022, the City of Tulsa PSO franchise agreement expires. Franchise renewal negotiations have been ongoing, sadly, behind closed doors since at least April of this year. On November 17 this year, the city faces a deadline. It has to set the date for a franchise renewal election. It has to do that because if everybody in the city and everybody in PSO came to an agreement for a new franchise agreement, they couldn't put it in place unless we, the people, ratified what they produced in a franchise renewal election. We believe the franchise renewal election will most likely be held on February 8, 2022. So there's limited time to demonstrate to the city council, mayor, the city franchise negotiators, public support for a franchise provision requiring PSO to embrace our electricity goal. In October of this year, PSO must submit to the Oklahoma Corporation Commission its integrated resources plan for the next decade. Now, integrated resources plans are documents where utilities share to the public and to regulators their operating plans for the next 10 years. And they must include in that document any plans they have to build and put in service new power plants, any plans that they have to take current power plants out of commission, any kind of purchasing program they may be thinking about entering into, anything that has to do with their operations that they foresee going to happen within the next decade, they have to put into that IRP. And we really think it's vitally important, we don't think it is vitally important, that PSO's new IRP does not include plans to own or operate new fossil fuel electric generators. It's also vitally important that it does contain plans for PSO to build or purchase clean, renewable, wind, solar, advanced battery electric generation facilities, and that on or before 2035, it obtains energy it needs in excess of what it generates only from clean, renewable sources. So there's limited time to demonstrate to PSO that there is significant public support for it becoming a 100% clean, renewable electricity provider by 2035. So why is this important? It's really, really important because the people who are climate change experts say it's vital. We must keep global average temperatures at or below 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. And one of the things we absolutely must do to achieve that is to decarbonize our electric grids by the end of 2035. Fortunately, wind generation and utility scale solar generation already, without subsidies, outcompete economically coal, traditional natural gas, and nuclear power plants. And it competes head to head with combined cycle natural gas power plants. 47 US cities and towns have already achieved the goal of having 100% of electricity used within their borders coming from clean, renewable sources. 183 cities and towns, 14 counties, and 8 states have passed the kind of resolution we are going to ask the City of Tulsa to commit to, which is commit to having 100% clean, renewable electricity by 2035. I'm interspersing in these slides reasons why it's important to mitigate climate change. If you haven't seen these documentaries, please do so as soon as possible. The Breaking Boundaries documentary you can find on Netflix. The Greta Thunberg documentary you can find through PBS. This shows how wind and solar are outcompeting most fossil energy generation. On the left, you can see the levelized cost of energy in terms of dollars per megawatt hour for utility scale solar and wind, and on the right for gas peaking, nuclear power, and coal and gas combined cycle. And you can see that utility scale solar and wind are dramatically outcompeting gas peaking, nuclear, and coal generators. I think they're more than competing head to head. I think they're beating, just by not as much, gas combined cycle generators. Oklahoma's current wind power ranking is number 3rd in the nation in terms of installed capacity. And Julie Skye put on Facebook and tagged me with it, an article out of the Tulsa World showing that there are new wind power projects getting ready to come into play that will make Oklahoma 2nd in the nation in terms of wind capacity. Most people are unaware that Oklahoma has the 9th best solar resources, with solar resources being defined as average peak sun hours. What do these two graphics tell us? They tell us that Oklahoma and Tulsa within Oklahoma has the capacity to be an energy producing superstar well into the 22nd century. We've been an top energy producing state ever since statehood, usually in a top 5 or 6 ranking. There's no reason why we can't maintain that status. We'll just do it with a different kind of energy. And I tell people everywhere, we should not fear this transition away from fossil energy to clean, renewable energy. In my entire time in Tulsa, which dates back to 1953, when my folks moved me here, the oil industry has been running away from Tulsa. One company after another moved to Houston, one company after another merged and then closed a bunch of the facilities here, or they just went out of business. This is clean, renewable energy is coming to Tulsa, and we need to embrace it and get on with that transition so we can have a thriving clean, renewable energy thriving sector here in Tulsa. That's Lake Mead. Lake Mead supplies water for 40 million people in the West, and that's what it looks like after 2 decades of climate change caused drought. There's going to be a huge water crisis out west. There already is, but it's going to get worse if this continues. Here are some of the 47 cities that have achieved the electricity goal. The three I put in red because they're located in politically red states. I put this up here to illustrate that this really isn't a blue state, red state, purple state, indifferent state kind of issue. It's what makes sense for each locale and what that locale wants to do for the good of its residents. Here are some of the nearby notable cities that have committed to the electricity goal, and you'll notice Norman and Stillwater right here in Oklahoma have done that, and so is Fayetteville and over in Arkansas. On the right column, third from the bottom, remember Columbus, Ohio. That's going to be important here in just a few minutes. Here are the 14 counties that are committed to the electricity goal. And of the 14, 7 of them are in really, really conservative states. There's 1 in Idaho, 3 in North Carolina, and 3 in Utah. There are no red states that have committed to the goal yet, but arguably Maine, Nevada, and Virginia are purple states, which means that they can flex back and forth. These are scenes from those terrible fires in California last year, and sadly, they're being recreated as we speak with each other this evening. So why is this feasible, and why can PSO be the answer? Well, PSO's current president, Peggy Simmons, about 2.5 years ago came to Tulsa from where? Columbus, Ohio, one of those cities that's committed to achieving the electricity goal. And when she was there, she managed a renewable energy portfolio for American Electric Power Company, which is PSO's parent company. In January, the Sierra Club released a study, and it ranked PSO #1 out of 79 major electric utilities in making progress toward becoming a 100% clean renewable electricity provider. PSO currently generates electricity exclusively through fossil fuel generators, but those generators are crazily old, and they'll either be out of service or they'll be so uneconomic we'll be paying a whole lot more than we should for electricity if they're still operating in 2035. They've got to replace them with something, and they should be replacing them with cheaper, non-emitting, clean, renewable sources such as wind, solar, and batteries. I didn't know this till late last year, but PSO purchases 67.3% of the electricity it delivers to us. And they purchase this electricity mainly from fossil fuel generators who are connected to the Southwest Power Pool grid. And interestingly enough, the fossil fuel generators connected to the Southwest Power Pool grid themselves are old and are likely to be out of service or uneconomic by 2035. On June 3rd of this year, we published this ad in the Tulsa World. We congratulated PSO for being ranked #1 in that study I just talked about. And we asked people to contact Peggy Simmons and congratulate her for the PSO achieving this ranking, and then say to her, hey, take this all the way, go all the way and be 100% by 2035 or sooner if you can. Here are the reasons why PSO was ranked #1. It plans to retire all its coal capacity by 2030. It does not plan, at least so far, it has not planned to add any new fossil fuel capacity, which by definition was going to be natural gas. It has announced plans to add enough solar capacity and wind capacity to equal 74% of its current generating capacity. Look how old PSO's power plants are. The ages are in the second column, the average retirement age for various classifications of of electric power generators are on the far right. It's just inconceivable that these power plants will still be in service by 2035. Or if they are, we're going to be paying through the nose for it, and we shouldn't have to. This shows that PSO is much more of a purchasing agent than a generator. And this raises a question. If PSO is going to be a purchasing agent for a huge part of the electricity it delivers to us, why should it be our purchasing agent, the exclusive purchasing agent for that amount of electricity? Other states give their commercial customers, the residential customers, even city by city, the choice to pick which purchasing agent they might want to use. And they often would get a better deal than if they relied upon their incumbent utility to be the purchasing agent. And as we speak, there's a movement in Oklahoma to try to bring that choice opportunity to us. That flood, that's Sand Springs, Oklahoma, on May 28, 2019. That was a pretty serious flood. I was recently on Lake Keystone, and I went under this bridge, and the boat I was on was about 30 feet below the top of that bridge. And at the right below the top of the bridge was a blue marker, and that blue marker was where the water was on May 28, 2019. So that was a pretty serious flood. So the middle column shows the average age of various categories of power plants within the Southwest Power Pool, shows that they're aging relative to retirement age. That's why I say that most of this is going to be cleared away by 2035. The good news is that the Southwest Power Pool's footprint is almost identical to that of the most dominant wind section in our country. That splotch of purple that ranges from about mid-Texas to the Canadian border, that's the most lush wind sources, save for offshore wind corridors on the east and west coast and the Great Lakes that exist within our nation. And that squiggly black line that kind of encompasses it is the Southwest Power Pool's footprint, which means we've got a ton after ton after ton of wind power that can be delivered to us through the Southwest Power Pool. On the left shows the recent retirements in the Southwest Power Pool. It's exclusively gas, oil, and natural gas, and some nuclear power plants. And on the right shows recent capacity additions, and since 2019, it's all been wind. So much wind has been added that at the first of the year, SPP announced that it had become the first regional transmission organization to have wind as its #1 fuel source. And this is going to be a whole lot more. Let's see if I missed one. Yeah, this is where you go. This is going to be a whole lot more going forward, because what you're seeing here are active generation interconnection requests, meaning these are projects that are stacked up. They're petitioning the Southwest Power Pool to be interconnected to its grid. And they're stacked up because there's congestion on the Southwest Power Pool transmission grid right now. They need more transmission capacity, or they need to get rid of the congestion by telling less efficient fossil fuel energy generators, you've got to get out of the way. There is a unit within the Southwest Power Pool called the Market Monitoring Unit. And they are tracking this, and they are telling the executives of the Southwest Power Pool, for God's sakes, clear this congestion. This is our future. They just make it abundantly clear. This is our future, not these fossil fuel generators currently on the system. That kangaroo was trying to get away from one of those horrendous fires in Australia last year. And that bear is what bears are beginning to look like up in the north in Alaska, because the melting ice makes it impossible for them to capture a lot of the food that they rely upon. I was backing out of my driveway not long ago, and there was a City of Tulsa truck parked in my way. So I stopped and got out and took a picture of this. This is the motto the city has posted on all its vehicles and signs. Tulsa, City of Tulsa, a new kind of energy. I show that to the counselors when I get a chance to be with them and say it's time to make this motto a reality. So we contend that climate change mitigation is the ultimate environmental justice goal, particularly because heat impacts really hammer a lot of different vulnerable populations. And if you think about who might be a part of the vulnerable population, it's usually non-white people, particularly if you think about the two latitudes above, immediately above and below the equator all around the world, the so-called tropical and semi-tropical zone. That's where the worst ravages are going to occur. And there are many more non-white people living there than white people. So this is the ultimate climate justice initiative. So here are the general parameters of the resolution we're asking the City of Tulsa to pass. The first one is the very simple one. They're going to commit all their resources and powers to achieving our electricity goal. Truthfully, if that's all they did, I would be a little disappointed, but not greatly, because that's what a lot of the cities have done who've embraced this goal. They just passed a resolution that just said something like that, and that was it. But that was fine, because then they went about examining what does it mean to use our powers and resources, and they began to find out things they could do to make this, to achieve this goal. But I want the city to do more than that. There are resources available at the federal, state, and private sector levels that are directed towards helping cities and residents transition to clean, renewable energy for their electricity. I want the city to do the work and the research and to find people who've done this work too, so they can identify where these resources are and reach out and start grabbing them. We want the city to take an example. The city, well before 2035, even before the grid is totally decarbonized, could decide to tell PSO, we're willing to do what's necessary for you to only supply clean, renewable electricity to the city for purposes of powering our operations and functions. There are a lot of regulatory proceedings and state legislative sessions that can affect the ability to transition to clean, renewable electricity. In some cases, it could be positive, meaning that we would like to bring things to the Oklahoma legislature and the regulatory agencies that would promote that transition. And then there are oftentimes, way too often, things coming up within the legislative sessions and the regulatory agencies that are designed to impede this transition. I've been on the Oklahoma Sierra Club Legislative Committee now for 3 years, and we're getting hammered over there. I've sat through many a regulatory hearing where we've gotten hammered. And the sad part is that in the few instances we've had a little bit of success, the key to that was there was more people in the room than a Ready for 100 representative, Montel Clark from the Oklahoma Sustainability Network, and Lindsay Peaver from the Oklahoma Solar Association. That's usually who's there. The three of us are representatives from those three groups, and then all of the utilities and people who do business with the utilities, people who have reason to want to stop this. But it's amazing when other people besides the three of our groups are in the room, sometimes we either have some small success or we avoid the worst case outcome. So we need the city. Not a single city, by the way, has shown up to participate in the kind of hearings or in the sessions looking for the kind of laws that I'm talking about. And if they showed up, it could make a difference, particularly if it was Oklahoma City and Tulsa. So there are a lot of barriers in Oklahoma to using rooftop and community solar. Get them on your roof or get them in your neighborhood. And it's because the financial and other terms for using rooftop and community solars are much worse here than in other states. Arkansas, for God's sakes, is no more conservative or less conservative than Oklahoma, but they've got robust deployment of rooftop and community solar because they've got a really generous net energy metering credit rate. We've got the lowest in the nation. And we hear from people, some people who've tried to install rooftop or community solar facilities around here, that the interconnection terms that OG&E and PSO confront them with are more onerous and burdensome than they are in other states. So we want the city to actively help Tulsa residents, business, and organizations have opportunity to install rooftop and community solar on terms equal to or better than that which is available in other states, and to identify and work to eliminate the barriers that make it more difficult to do this here than in other states. So achieving efficiency in the use of electricity is very important. There is a technical term for that. One way you could think about a utility providing power is they go out and buy or generate, what do we call them, megawatts. But another way they could do it would be to implement programs that would help us quit using as much electricity as we otherwise would use. There's a term for that. It's called negawatts. So we want to promote negawatts. We want to have the City of Tulsa actively help Tulsa residents, businesses, and organizations have the opportunity to eliminate wasteful consumption of electricity and achieve the most efficient use of it. So we want them to identify and eliminate barriers that get in the way, and there are barriers. I'll side with PSO a little bit on this. This isn't a PSO problem. PSO has had a much more ambitious is much more ambitious on this front than the Oklahoma Corporation Commission will allow it to be. The Oklahoma Corporation Commission is somewhat hostile to this whole notion. And the reason why is that if they reduce electricity, then they're going to reduce natural gas consumption that powers the generators here. We want the City of Tulsa to set an example by eliminating wasteful consumption and achieve the most efficient use of electricity in its operations and functions as soon as possible. This is really important, achieving energy justice. We need the City of Tulsa to side with vulnerable low-income residents to help them live in energy-efficient homes. They could do this, for instance, through building codes and in building inspections and the like. Identify and find programs or work with the city's private sector to raise the money necessary to help them acquire the electricity they need, and to help them secure jobs within the emerging energy efficiency and distributed electricity generation industries. How could they do that? Well, they could really try to do everything they can to get training centers here in Tulsa, where it's easy for people to train to do those jobs, and make sure that low-income, vulnerable residents have an opportunity to receive that training. So now we want the City of Tulsa to, in this resolution, talk directly to PSO. Ask them directly to replace fossil fuel electricity generating facilities that are retired only with clean, renewable electricity generation. Ask them directly to stop purchasing the electricity it needs in excess of the electricity it generates on or before 2035. Ask them directly to maximize its use of cost-effective demand-side management programs. These are the programs where they're helping us achieve energy efficiency and reduce peak capacity demands. An example of this is PSO not long ago had an incentive for people to install more efficient windows. They actually gave you a big credit on your bills if you would do that. So we installed them here. That was a perfect example of demand side management. In some parts of the country, utilities actually will pay people to replace a particular appliance that's energy inefficient with one that's more efficient. That's demand side management. We would like to have more aggressive programs like that here. We want them to directly talk to PSO about energy justice. PSO could on its own establish programs that are better than they have now to help low-income residents acquire the electricity they need, minimize their electricity consumption. And if PSO does the wind and solar projects they're contemplating doing, they're going to need more and more technicians to make that happen. PSO ought to be asked to reach out and help train people from vulnerable low-income residents to do this work and then hire them. So our final appeal to the city, and I close with this, is, hey, Tulsa, please become an RF100 climate taming city and join us in this effort.